Full story. Forced to marry in her sister's place. Forced to marry in her sister's place. The Alpha King lifted her chin and said, "You're mine." True real-life story. 3RD person. Single part. Nadia was the kind of girl that people walked past without stopping. Not because she was unpleasant or dull. The quiet one. The one who sat at the edge of family photos. Who got the smaller room. Who was never asked what she wanted, because nobody thought to ask. Her older sister Rania got the attention, the compliments, the carefully chosen clothes laid out the night before any important event. Nadia got the leftovers of everyone's energy, and she had learned, over many years, to be okay with that. Their father was a man who believed deeply in appearances and alliances. He had built a decent life for himself through careful connections. The right handshakes with the right people, the right word dropped at the right time. So when a marriage proposal arrived from the Al-Malik family, he did not think about which of his daughters would be happy. He thought about which match would benefit him most. Rania was older. Rania was the obvious choice. And so it was decided, announced, and planned, all within a matter of weeks, that Rania would marry Darius Al-Malik, the head of one of the most respected and feared families in the region. The wedding date was set. The arrangements were made. Nadia helped with the decorations and said nothing. What nobody knew was that Rania had been keeping a secret for almost a year. She had fallen in love with someone else, a man their father would never approve of. No wealth, no status, no powerful last name. Just someone Rania had met quietly, away from the family's eyes, and had slowly given her whole heart to. She had not told anyone because she knew exactly what the reaction would be. So she had stayed silent, smiled through every wedding preparation, and waited. And the night before her wedding, she made her decision. "I can't do it," Rania whispered, sitting on the edge of Nadia's bed at past midnight. Her eyes were red, her bags were already packed, and sitting near the door of her own room down the hall. "I love someone else. I have to go. Please. Just cover for me until morning. That's all I'm asking." Nadia sat there in the dark and stared at her sister. She wanted to say so many things. She wanted to ask why Rania hadn't spoken up months ago, before the hall was booked and the food was ordered, and their relatives had traveled from other cities. But Rania's eyes were desperate, in a way Nadia had never seen before, and so Nadia said nothing except, "Go, be careful," and Rania left before sunrise. By 7 in the morning, their father knew. He did not shout, which somehow made it worse. He sat in his chair in the main room and went very still, the way a person goes still when they are calculating rather than feeling. Nadia stood in the doorway, watching him think. She could almost see the problem being rearranged in his head like furniture, which pieces could be moved, which could be replaced. Then he looked at her. "You will go in her place," he said. Nadia felt the words land somewhere in her chest. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Baba, he doesn't even know me. The arrangement was for Rania. The arrangement was for this family," he said, and his voice carried that particular flatness that meant the conversation was already over. "You are my daughter. You will go." There was no argument that would work. She understood that in the same way she understood the weather, something you could dislike but could not change. So 2 hours later, she was sitting in her sister's wedding clothes, in a car she had not chosen, heading toward a man she had never met, wearing a name that wasn't hers. She kept telling herself to breathe. Just breathe. Get through the ceremony. Figure out the rest later. The Al-Malik home was large and quiet, in the way that only very old, very serious families manage. Every room felt like it had seen important things and was not impressed by any of them. The ceremony itself was formal and brief. There were guests who watched her carefully and said polite things she could not fully hear, because her own heartbeat was too loud. She signed where she was told to sign. She sat where she was told to sit. She kept her eyes mostly down, not out of submission, but out of the very practical fear that if she made eye contact with the wrong person, something in her face would give her away. Darius Al-Malik had barely spoken to her during the ceremony. He was present, composed, and unreadable. The kind of man who had probably never been caught off guard in his life. She had glanced at him twice, and both times looked away quickly. He was not frightening in an obvious way. He was frightening in the way that very calm, very observant people can be frightening, like still water that you can't see the bottom of. The reception stretched into the evening. People ate and spoke and laughed, and Nadia moved through it all like a person walking through a dream, present but disconnected. She was standing near a window, holding a glass of water she hadn't touched, when she heard his footsteps behind her. She turned. Darius was standing closer than she expected. He looked at her for a moment, really looked at her, the way people rarely do, and then he said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "You are not Rania." The glass in her hand went cold. Her mind went completely blank. Every prepared excuse she had half formed in the back of her head over the past several hours vanished in that single second. She said nothing. He did not call anyone over. He did not raise his voice. He simply reached out, placed 2 fingers gently beneath her chin, and tilted her face up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. And in that moment, with guests moving and talking 20 feet away, he said, "You're mine, and I think you always were." She didn't know what to do with those words. They were not what she had expected. She had expected anger, or cold dismissal, or worst of all, public humiliation. Not this. Life in the Al-Malik home in the weeks that followed was nothing like the fear she had carried through that first day. Darius did not ignore her, but he also did not crowd her. He gave her space in a way that felt considered rather than distant. He asked about her opinion on small things at first, what she thought of a particular book he'd left on the table, whether she preferred the courtyard in the morning or the evening. She answered carefully, still waiting for the moment everything would collapse. But that moment didn't come. She began to notice things about him that surprised her. He was not the cold, untouchable figure the family name suggested. He was someone who thought carefully before speaking, and meant what he said when he did. He noticed details, small, specific details. He noticed that she reached for something to read before she reached for breakfast. He noticed that she went quiet when something was actually interesting to her, not when she was bored. He once slid a book across the table to her without a word, something she'd mentioned briefly and only once, weeks before. She wasn't sure if she should be touched or unsettled that he had remembered. What hung between them, through all of it, was the truth she had not yet fully said out loud. He knew she was not Rania. She knew that he knew. But neither of them had addressed it directly since that night, and the silence around it had grown heavy in a way that started to feel dishonest. And dishonesty, Nadia had discovered, sat badly with her when it came to him specifically. The letter from her father arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was written in the careful, formal tone he used when he wanted something. A tone Nadia had grown up recognizing immediately. He wanted her to speak to Darius about a certain business matter, to use her position, as he put it, to benefit the family, to do what she was placed there to do. She read it twice, then she folded it, held it in her hands for a long while, and walked to Darius's study. She placed the letter on his desk. He looked at it, then at her. "I need to tell you everything," she said, "from the beginning." And she did. She told him about Rania leaving the night before the wedding, about her father's decision, about the borrowed dress and the borrowed name, and the fear she had carried through every moment of that first day. She did not apologize excessively. She did not cry. She just told him the truth, plainly and completely, and then she stood there and let him decide what it meant. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she started to prepare herself for the worst. Then he said, "I know. I knew from the first night." She stared at him. "Your sister's family had described her to me in detail," he said. "You matched none of it. But you were not pretending to be someone else. You were simply trying to survive a situation you had not chosen. I wanted to see what kind of person you actually were." He paused. "Now I know." She stood there in his study and felt something shift inside her. Not dramatically, not like something breaking, but like something that had been held very tightly for a very long time, finally being allowed to rest. The harder confrontation came days later, when her father arrived at the house uninvited. He was clearly furious that she had confessed, furious that she had made a decision without consulting him, had acted on her own judgment, had potentially disrupted the arrangement he had constructed. He stood in the entrance hall and began speaking directly to Darius, over Nadia's head, as though she were a problem to be managed between two men. Darius listened. He was perfectly courteous. He let her father finish every sentence. Then he turned to Nadia, and in a voice that was calm and completely firm, he said, "Your daughter, this one, will not be receiving instructions from you any longer." He reached out and held her hand, lightly but clearly, not as a performance, as a statement of something real. Her father left without getting what he had come for. Nadia stood in the hall for a moment after the door closed, aware of something she had not felt in a very long time, maybe ever. The feeling of someone standing beside her, not behind her, not above her, not walking ahead while she kept up, beside her. Rania reached out eventually. Her elopement had become public knowledge, and the relationship she had run away for had not worked out the way she had hoped. Her message to Nadia was warm, but also, underneath the warmth, expectant, the quiet assumption that Nadia would fold, the way she always had, and offer comfort and understanding without requiring anything in return. Nadia wrote back, she was kind. She was not cold, but she was also not the same person she had been the night she sat on that bed in the dark and said, "Go, be careful," and ask for nothing in return. She had built something real, not something given to her, not something assigned, but something she had walked into honestly and stayed in truthfully. She was not willing to shrink it to make anyone else more comfortable. She had arrived at that marriage wearing her sister's name. She had stayed in it as herself. And that, in the end, was the only part of the story she needed to be proud of. Not the dress, not the family name she had married into, not the house or the position, or any of the things her father had calculated when he looked at her across that room and made his decision. Just the fact that when the moment came to tell the truth, knowing it could cost her everything, she had told it anyway. That was hers. Nobody had given it to her. Nobody could take it back. Approx. 2,100 words,